Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring you today's most pressing issues from across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Amid the ongoing political turmoil in South Korea, Seoul's Foreign Minister Tae-yul and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met on Monday for a pivotal discussion, reaffirming the strong bilateral alliance. With the Trump administration set to begin its second term this month, both sides emphasized the importance of continued collaboration on pressing regional security issues, particularly the threat posed by North Korea, which has been deepening relations with Russia. The meeting also highlighted efforts to strengthen trilateral cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, alongside closer collaboration with NATO allies. Now, given the current domestic and geopolitical uncertainties, what lies ahead for the future of Seoul-Washington ties? For answers to this, we invite Min Jung-hoon, a professor at the Korean National Diplomatic Academy, into the studio with us. Welcome.
My pleasure.
And we're also joined by our Voice of America correspondent, Chris Casquejo from Washington. Great to see you again, Chris.
Great to see you, too.
So let's begin with Professor Min. The latest meeting marks the first since South Korea's short-lived martial law crisis. And during the talks, discussions on the impeachment crisis, the current political turmoil in South Korea has been mentioned also. How do you assess the current state of relations between Seoul and Washington, and what kind of steps do you think are necessary to normalize relationship?
Yes, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Seoul, and he had the meetings with his Korean counterparts. And specifically during the meeting with the South Korean Foreign Minister Tae-yul, Blinken said that he conveyed first his grave concerns about the President Yoon's martial law measures. And he also mentioned that South Korea's democracy is resilient and the U.S. has full confidence in South Korea's institutions. And the U.S. also believes that South Korea will continue to operate as a world-leading democracy. And the two ministers agreed that the meeting was a complete restoration of a trust in the South Korea-U.S. alliance, and that there is no gap in the alliance. And meanwhile, they expressed their condemnation of the ballistic missiles launched by North Korea on Monday, and emphasized that they agreed to respond resolutely to any possibility through a watertight joint defense posture and extended deterrence. So I think the Secretary Blinken's visit to South Korea this time is like a farewell visit before the inauguration of the second Trump government, but it is also perceived as an example of the face-to-face diplomacy that confirms the ROK-US alliance during the turbulent domestic political situation of South Korea. So I think that Blinken's visit this time is kind of the good example or symbol that the U.S. Fully restores its relations with South Korea.
So it has trust that South Korea would normalize the situation again. Now to Chris, what do you think experts say about the impact of internal political conflicts here in South Korea and its foreign relations, especially with the U.S.?
Analysts say the South Korean political crisis poses a risk to the regional security because North Korea, China, and Russia are waiting to take advantage of the situation. Bruce Klingner is the senior research fellow for Northeast Asia at the Heritage Foundation, and he said the resulting political turmoil raises uncertainty over the future direction of the country's policies and ability to implement them. Klingner also cited the uncertainty in Japan, which recently elected a new prime minister and had a leadership change and a loss of legislative majority by the Liberal Democratic Party, which ruled Japan for decades. And he notes that the U.S. now has two weekend allies in the region. But Andrew Yeo, who is the South Korea Foundation Chair in Korea Studies at the Brookings Institution, said that based on President-elect Donald Trump's key cabinet appointments, such as Representative Mike Waltz for National Security Advisor and Senator Marco Rubio for Secretary of State, and they are both seen as China hawks, he says that countering China will be a key focus of the next Trump administration, and good ties between Seoul and Tokyo would be desirable. But at the same time, he noted that Trump has a preference for dealing with countries bilaterally, rather than with these multilateral alliances that President Biden has put into place. So that's something to watch moving forward.
Right. Now let's turn on to the latest provocation by North Korea, like we've touched upon a while ago. On the same day, the foreign ministers of South Korea and Washington has met. North Korea held its first provocation of the year. Professor Min, how do you read into the timing, and what do you think North Korea wants to send a message through this?
Yeah, first, the South Korean military said on Monday that it detected the launch of an IRBM intermediate range ballistic missile from the Pyongyang area, and the missile flew about 1,100 kilometers before the falling into the East Sea. And the North Korean state media said the following day that it successfully tested fired the new IRBM with a hypersonic warhead. And North Korea also said that the missile flew about 1,500 kilometers at 12 times the speed of sound, and Kim Jong-un watched it through a monitoring system. And Kim Jong-un said that the development of such a missile was aimed at bolstering the country's nuclear war deterrent, and the hypersonic missile system would reliably contain any rivals in the region. North Korea's missile launch this time, as you mentioned, was the first provocation of this year in about the 2 months, and it came about just 2 weeks before the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump takes office on January 20th. So personally, I think the hypersonic missile test is a scheduled provocation to improve the North Korea's military capabilities first. And the hypersonic missile is usually hard to intercept with existing the missile defense systems. And the hypersonic missiles are included in the sophisticated weapons Kim Jong-un vowed to develop in 2021, alongside with the nuclear-powered submarines, spy satellites, and solid fuel intercontinental ballistic missiles. Meanwhile, North Korea's missile test this time is also, I think, aimed at enhancing its negotiating power with the United States. As you know, the Trump government is expected to resume summit diplomacy with North Korea. So I think it's like the military provocation just for enhancing its military power before the resumption of the talks with the United States.
So it's a showcase of them having better weapons before Trump comes in. Now, with the increasing cooperation between North Korea and Russia, of course, Secretary Blinken has warned about North Korea potentially receiving advanced military technologies from Russia. Chris, could you give us the details of what Blinken has revealed yesterday?
Right. While he was in South Korea, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken revealed that Russia appears to be willing to share advanced space and satellite technology with North Korea, which could help it advance its ICBM, or intercontinental ballistic missile program, believed to have the capability to strike at U.S. territories currently, such as Guam. Secretary of State Blinken also said that Russian President Vladimir Putin was getting closer to reversing decades of policy and tolerating a nuclear North Korea.
Right. Thank you for the explanation. Now, the importance of extended deterrence and combined defense posture has also been highlighted during the foreign ministers' meeting. Professor, how do you assess the current South Korea-U.S. military cooperation that could go in response to North Korea's provocations?
Well, personally, I think that the South Korea-U.S. military cooperation has not been the change at all, regardless of the political turmoils in South Korea, and it remains robust and strong. South Korea is going through the political turmoil, and the U.S. will have a new government later this month, but there has been little change in the strategic environments and the considerations that the two countries face, and the military of the two countries have maintained a solid and strong defense posture and cooperation. In other words, we just got political turmoil and the changes and the little influence and changes in the defense posture and military readiness. So I think that the two ministers wanted to emphasize that there has been little change in terms of the making cooperations between two countries for the extended deterrence and combined the defense posture. So I think the militaries, they are doing their job successfully, and we just need to resolve the political turmoil as soon as possible, and we can get back to the normalcy. I think, again, it's what the two ministers wanted to emphasize during the meeting.
Mm-hmm. So we are aware that North Korea has been launching recent missiles and they have been closing ties with Russia. What kind of strategies do you think should South Korea and the U.S. employ to address these threats from North Korea and enhance cooperation?
Well, there could be the two types of the things that the two countries can make. First, the enhancing the extended deterrence and the military cooperation, and the second is the try to make the North Korea back to the negotiating table. For the first, the military side, the ROK-U.S. alliance, as you know, has been the foundation of the preserving the peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. And considering the situation where North Korea's nuclear and missile capabilities are becoming more advanced, the alliance will continue to function as a cornerstone for coping with North Korea's military threats. So that the countries, South Korea and U.S., needed to enhance their military cooperation and the extended deterrence against North Korea. As you know, the two countries have got the regular meetings in terms of enhancing their extended deterrence through the NCG, nuclear consultative groups, and they have got the much institutionalized systems in terms of the sharing the informations and conducting joint military exercises for the extended deterrence. So they are going through the scheduled steps to improve their extended deterrence against North Korea. But meanwhile, improving the military cooperation cannot completely deter North Korea's determination to enhance its nuclear and missile capabilities. So the two countries needed to make North Korea come back to the negotiating table. Again, it is likely that the upcoming Trump government will resume its talks with North Korea and revitalize the summit diplomacy between the two countries. So in order for South Korea to stay in the talks, it needed to strengthen its communication with the U.S. and persuade the ally about why South Korea should remain in the process and what roles South Korea could do for the United States. Then the two countries, South Korea and U.S., needed to work together and make the plan and try to bring North Korea to come back to the negotiating table and try to make a progress in denuclearizing North Korea.
Right, so boosting military cooperation and bringing back North Korea to the negotiating table. Now, as our Professor Min mentioned, Chris, the fourth meeting of the South Korea-U.S. Nuclear Consultative Group will be held soon in Washington on the 10th. And after being postponed due to the martial law situation here in Korea. Chris, what are the key issues expected to be discussed at this meeting, and how significant is it for the South Korea-U.S. alliance?
Expect the two countries to continue to build on what's been going on in the past NCG meetings. The Biden administration and the Yoon administration have focused on strengthening the nature of the alliance between the two countries as a nuclear-based alliance and institutionalizing extended deterrence through the NCG to counter North Korea's advancement of nuclear weapons. Now, Professor Im Ul-chul of the Institute of Far Eastern Studies at Kyungnam University said that for incoming President Trump, he prefers individual talks with North Korea and Russia, and that the political uncertainty in North Korea provides room for him to make a new choice that focuses on America's national interests rather than alliances, an extension of Trump's so-called America First foreign policy, and breaking away from the Biden administration's Korean Peninsula policy of pursuing a value alliance against authoritarian forces. So, we're going to see a change in strategy from the next administration because Trump does favor one-on-one talks with countries and individual leaders. And, he's probably going to be asking North Korea to pay more for the housing of U.S. troops, so he might use the political uncertainty in North Korea as a reason to bring that issue up again. It seems to be a common theme with Trump as he's done that with the NATO allies in Europe.
Right, so that would also influence the direction of South Korea-U.S. alliance going forward. Now, Chris, Secretary Blinken's visit to South Korea is being framed as a farewell visit, like our Professor Min mentioned a while ago, before the inauguration of the Trump administration. Given the potential shift in U.S. policy, what kind of challenges or opportunities could arise?
Well, analysts say for the U.S., it depends on which party eventually assumes leadership in South Korea. Bruce Klingner is a senior fellow for Northeast Asia at the Heritage Foundation, and he said China would welcome a DP government in Seoul since the new administration would be conciliatory toward Beijing and Pyongyang and more antagonistic toward Washington and Seoul. But Robert Repson, who served as the Charge d'Affaires and Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in Seoul from 2018 to 2021, said the U.S. will remain a priority relationship for the next Korean administration, regardless of whether it is progressive or conservative. And Repson said that a positive result that can emerge from closer South Korea and China ties would be greater cooperation from China in managing the relationship with North Korea, especially if, as expected, Donald Trump resumes summit diplomacy with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un.
All right, then, Professor, what kind of specific adjustments do you think will be needed in South Korea's diplomatic approach to strengthen bilateral ties with the United States?
Well, I think that the ROK-U.S. alliance will continue to be solid and durable under the second Trump administration, mainly in terms of the South Korea's strategic importance to the United States. I think that even the President Trump will agree on the need for maintaining its cooperation with South Korea in the areas of security, economy, technology, and energy, which President Trump truly cares about, and to check the rise of China and to secure U.S. economic interests in the region. But on the South Korean side, securing South Korea's interests in the face of President Trump's transaction-oriented alliance view and America First trade policy will be a major task in the ROK-U.S. relationship under the upcoming Trump government. Specifically, personally, I think that U.S. will be aggressive in its trade relations with South Korea in order to reduce its trade deficit. There would be no distinction between allies and non-allies in terms of U.S. making efforts to reduce its trade policy all over the world. So trade barriers on South Korea's exports to the United States are expected to increase because South Korea is one of the countries with a trade surplus with the United States. So, for example, recently, a think tank institution in South Korea issued the report that if the President Trump issues the universal base tariffs against South Korea, probably about 10%, then the South Korea's economy or the GDP will significantly affected by that kind of measure, and South Korea will lose about around 10% of economic development just in terms of the tariffs imposed by the Trump government. So I think that South Korea will need to be more realistic and pragmatic to cope with the second Trump government from aggressive moves of reducing its trade deficit. Specifically, South Korea can reduce its trade surplus by importing more natural gas and oil from the United States. On the other hand, South Korea also got their concerns in terms of maintaining the solid relationship with the United States in terms of the alliance system. as I mentioned, the Trump got the transaction-oriented alliance view. So many people, including myself, expected that in terms of the second government, President Trump will be very aggressive in terms of the requesting the increase the burden sharing to the South Korea. Although South Korea completed the SMA deals with the Biden government sometime before earlier this year, but the Trump may argue that the Biden government made a mistake and did not secure the national interest in terms of the negotiation with the South Korea. So he will request the South Korea to do the new deal for the burden sharing. Then the South Korean people will be very disappointed, maybe they're upset in terms of how it's the true ally, the biggest ally, United States, treats the important ally in East Asia. So it would be important for South Korean government to wisely cope with by the Trump government's request of the increasing burden sharing.
Right, so a lot of burden in terms of economy and military here in South Korea, but we'll see how it goes. Now, Professor, let's move on to relations with China and Japan. Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi is scheduled to visit South Korea next week, and the government is also coordinating a trilateral foreign ministers meeting with China also. What kind of diplomatic initiatives do you think South Korea should prioritize in its relations with China and Japan?
Well, we know that South Korea and Japan are very important allies of the United States. So it is not likely that the three countries, South Korea, China, and Japan, will mainly talk about security and military cooperations when they meet. Instead, I think that they are the neighboring countries and they have got the economic and trade relations for a long time. So I think it's more likely that they will talk about economy, trade, human exchange, and other relatively pragmatic issues. And as you may know, nowadays China is trying to enhance its relations with South Korea and Japan. It seems that China wants to manage its relations with the neighboring countries in the situation where its strategic competition with the United States has been intensified. So China wants the two neighboring countries, South Korea and Japan, not to get too much closer to the United States. Because if the two countries are getting too much closer to the United States, China will be very isolated, and it's very difficult to try to find the diplomatic space and the room to maintain its influence over the region. So I think that China would be very favorable to the neighboring countries. So personally, I think that it would be a very good chance for South Korea to have a momentum to improve its relations with China.
All right. I'm afraid we'll have to leave our discussion right here. Many thanks again to Professor Min and Chris, of course. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.